Welcome to Let Me Say This. My name is Tisha Tyler, your host, the practical entrepreneur. My guest for today's show is Cassandra Schaeg, like the bad haircut, the founder and owner of Sip Wine and Beer in Escondido, California. Hey, Cassandra, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I thank you so much for joining me. I'm looking forward to an engaging and fun conversation. That's the operative word, engaging, fun, but also educational at the same time. So now let me ask you this. Who is Cassandra Schaeg?
Cassandra Schaeg is a hustler. No,
That's what, did you see my social media post today? That's what I posted today. Hustle. That was it. That was my only word for the day.
yeah. I've worked several jobs.
Uh-huh.
I've been fortunate to have a great career, and at the end of the day, my purpose is just to help other people, and I've done that in various roles. And so, who I am, a Black woman who's a hustler, who's an entrepreneur, who wants to help other entrepreneurs be successful. To sum it up.
All right. Now, in 2015, you opened Sip Wine and Beer in Escondido, California, which is also the home of Stone Brewing Company. So if anybody's familiar with craft beers, and especially the San Diego craft beer scene, Stone is king.
Yes.
They have a great location up there too. When I used to live in San Diego, I used to go up there sometimes for events. Very nice. Now, did you have a background in the alcohol industry? And if not, then what was it that made you decide that this is the business for me?
I do not have a formal background in wine and beverage or in the alcohol industry. I used to work with tribes. I have a degree in public finance. I worked in corporate settings, and the gist of it is that I wanted to work for myself and be my own boss. And so, growing up in Temecula, it's a huge wine presence in Temecula, and I
Right.
thought that I could create my own little community and doing that in Escondido. And so I just took a leap of faith.
Okay.
There was no book I read. It was just,
Yeah.
what is going to be the essence of this wine bar, and I'm going to infuse beer and the community and culture and conversation and hope that it works out. And so
So far, so good.
yes, ma'am. Thankfully, it's worked out.
Uh-huh.
Open doors in 2016 and we're still open. We actually just did a soft opening on Saturday. Now that the governor lifted the indoor operations.
So you mentioned that you used to work with the tribes. So for people who are not familiar with the Southern California area, if you can talk a little bit about that how did that work influence what you're doing now?
So I worked throughout the state of California on various reservations with Native American families.
Mhm.
The reservation is it's a different world than per se the urban areas that we live in. And in terms of education completion and unemployment, they have one of the highest rates of both. Um, in how I attribute that to working in what I do now, it's about helping people. As a Black woman, we understand how grossly underrepresented we are in all facets of the workforce, including
Mhm.
the wine and beer sector. And it's just another avenue for me to break into, learn, engage with other people who want to do the same, who look like me, and most important, elevate the brands that are up and coming and really good brands that are owned by women, owned by Black men, owned by brown people, owned by everyone. And so that's the platform that I've created, and that's how I give back in terms of helping.
Now, I think it's interesting the way that you um, talk about your business. You talk about the experience of it being a community and education and that conviviality. So, how did you come up with that concept or that idea?
Well, it, the wine industry it's pictured as a white male dominated industry.
Hmm.
very, you got to pay to play. Wine often has this, you got to make a certain amount of money. You have to look a certain way. You have to act a certain way. You have to have all of this wine experience and knowledge to drink wine, and it's false.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is, there are so many wines out there that, you know, you can gather with your friends, you can have great conversations, you can try new things, you can explore and elevate your palate and experience trying these things. And that's essentially what I wanted to do. You know, I love hip hop. You come into the wine bar, there'll be hip hop playing. You know, it just depends on the mood. And that,
Okay.
you know, that's not something you see every day. You know,
Right. Now let me ask you this. Do you carry Snoop Dogg's wine?
I do not.
Just curious. I've never tried it. I see it all the time, but you know.
No, I don't carry his wine. And so here's a little segue. One of the things that I'm trying to do is, the wine industry has carved out this segment for Black people that we only like sweet wine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not the case.
Right.
Or, you know, that we only drink Moscato. And so the beverage industry has created this kind of, you know, Black people will buy all the sweet stuff up. And that's fine, but you got to know that there's more to the industry, and if there's more out there. And so I'm the person that's carrying brands that you're not going to see often in the stores, or I'm the person that's carrying brands by winemakers and founders who are doing phenomenal things, have a great story. Their wine is, you know, is good, and they are also giving back as well. And so my business model is very risky, because I'm elevating local women and minority owned brands. And at the end of the day, if no one buys them, then I'm not in business. So you know, not that I have to, but my goal is to share their stories. So you tell a friend about a wine that you had, and they can now go on their website and buy it from, you know, that wine brand. You know, the goal is to really make sure that we're being intentional about where we're putting our money. And the community, that means I need the community to be intentional about coming to sip wine and beer, or supporting the brands that, you know, I speak about at the shop or on social media. So there's the intentionality behind it, is that we can all make this happen for everybody.
Now, you mentioned that you feel that your business model is risky. Is it really risky? Do you feel it's risky because you're stepping outside of a box that has been created? As you mentioned, it is a white male dominated industry. So do you feel that's why it's risky? Or do you feel that it's risky because this is something a little different for a Black woman to do, and for people of color to support?
It's both. You know, you have the big box retailers out here, which do what they do and provide a service. And some of us are so trained and ingrained to just divert to that. And I'm one that's, if I go to a tire shop, I'm gonna go to the small business tire shop. I'm not gonna go to a bigger chain. And the data is pretty clear that the economy is supported by a small business. And so if there is a wine brand that does not have the marketing dollars to compete with other big name brands, then it's my responsibility to engage the community and to share that with them, so they can continue spreading that knowledge as well. And it is risky, because some people might not be for it, you know. Snoop Dogg is a well-known name. I don't need to carry Snoop. Like, Snoop is good, you know.
He's good. He can carry his own, right?
Snoop is doing just fine. You know, my focus is, you know, Lafette Rosé and Danae Burston, and making sure that, you know, people know about his rosé, or the McBride sisters, and making, you know, that Black girl magic continues.
I did see the McBride sisters on a cooking show. I love cooking shows. Yeah. So, okay, great.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the goal. I mean, the McBride sisters they've been in the wine industry for 15 years. You know, it took what, 14 years, 13 years for the name to make sense to everybody, and to become a household name. And, you know, any way that we can make that happen easier and faster for some phenomenal brands out there, we should do it.
I agree 100%. Let's talk a little bit about the city of Escondido. Um, I would say that Temecula, well known for its all of the wineries. You travel a little further south to Escondido, not so much. Keep going. San Diego, well known for its beers. So you're right in the middle there. Why did you choose Escondido, and what has the reception been like with the community there, especially people of color?
Yeah, so Escondido is actually 33% Hispanic,
Mm-hmm.
and I think 0.6 make up Black folks in Escondido. So I always joke around, it's about 15, right?
Right,
We all
right.
know each other. And I decided to lay roots in Escondido. It was close, it was close enough to my parents. The cost of living was reasonable in order to be a first time, homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
Reminded me of what Temecula used to look like and before it was developed. And so Escondido has been going through redevelopment. And prior, it used to be a big agricultural city. And now that
Mm-hmm.
agriculture is coming back. And there is about 30 wineries in Escondido.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so
Didn't realize that.
between Escondido and Ramona and
Mm-hmm.
Valley Center,
Mm-hmm.
there's agriculture. There are people that are making great wine locally. They're branching out, and so I'm starting to see the remnants of Temecula, where Highland Valley wine area has wineries stretching along its roads, and in another year or two, more wineries will start popping up. And so I wanted to be the hub for that, as well
Okay.
as other brands. And that's why I chose Escondido. I didn't want to be cliche. I want to do something different in this town. And
Mm-hmm.
in looking at the data and just looking at the way that the city's evolving. And look, Escondido is a very conservative city. It was starting to get purple, it turned low, it inched back on the red. But for the most part, as a business owner, the community has been very supportive in my business model and what I do, and the value that I bring to the city of Escondido. So I appreciate them for that.
So, as a business coach, one of the things that I'm always trying to drive home is the need to know their numbers and the need to use data to make informed business decisions. You've mentioned data a couple of times in our conversation. Can you talk a little bit about how you have used data to help you make decisions in your business?
Yeah, data is the single most important thing that drives the problems that you're looking to solve as an entrepreneur. And when I looked around in Escondido and I said, well, how many wine bars are there in Escondido? Zero. Okay, there might be a need. What's the population of Escondido? What's the demographic? What's the average wage earner or household income of the city that I'm wanting to lay roots and start a business in? And all of these things contribute to whether or not my business has any success of thriving, and what the future could look like based on looking at data and trends. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you look at the housing market, when you look at the way people spend money, those things help you drive decisions as to how you want to create a business. And truly, as an entrepreneur, you're looking to solve a problem. And so for Sip Wine and Beer and me starting this venture, it was to bridge the gap of the lack of diversity in the industry. It was to bring my community together and to continue elevating the wine presence that was taking place. And it was to also elevate the brands that are often overlooked, and the brains behind those brands, who are local winemakers, women, and minorities. And so in order to do that, I had to do a lot of research on who those brands were. How was I going to get access to those brands? How much did that cost? How much money is the city of Escondido pouring into its city for people to come in and spend money? And all of those things are a factor in, is your business going to thrive? And if you have those numbers and they look on the up, then that there is a likelihood that your business could be successful. And if it's stagnant, then that's definitely a riskier area that you're going to get in.
Right. And you're going to have to think twice about it
Mhm.
or come up with a different business model.
Yep.
So let's go back to, you mentioned the demographics. You looked at the demographics. Talk about some of the demographics that were important for you.
Oh, well, San Diego County as a whole, I believe Black people account for less than 5%.
Mm-hmm. I think it's
Black
about 115, 120,000 Black people there, right?
Black entrepreneurs in San Diego County account for less.
Mm-hmm.
And either I was gonna contribute or not, and I decided to contribute. And San Diego County is a great county to live in, but there needs to be a support system to elevate Black entrepreneurship and Black business ownership within this county. And in starting my business, I can see that the growth and the progress is taking place, but the demographics are important because when you look at it on a grander scale, you see the race gap, the wealth gap, um, and the gap of Black-owned businesses across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at it on a bigger scale, and you know that those numbers are small, now look at it in San Diego, and it's going to hit home because it's so much smaller, and that shows the need for more entrepreneurship and resources for people to be able to take that leap of faith and invest in themselves and to do that. And so the demographics in the wine and beer industry, women account for less than 2% in the industry. And so Black and brown people account for, we don't even get a point, you know?
Yeah.
So again, that should not be the case. And it's either something where I'm either going to be the person who is intentionally consuming Black and women owned brands and local brands, or I'm also going to consume and share the knowledge as well. And I made the decision to do both.
There you go. Let's talk a little bit about access. Alcohol industry has traditionally been a white male dominated industry. What challenges that you face in getting access to, one, a liquor license? Those are gold and I've heard incredibly expensive. So what challenges did you face in that, in getting that over that hurdle?
When you look at when you talk about the wealth gap and generational wealth, and you hear several big name winery stories, like the access they had was their grandparents or their parents left them a sizable amount of money and stuff, and gave them not even a fair, but a shot to just do whatever it is that they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Black families and brown families. And my parents decided to leave San Diego and purchase their first home in Temecula before it was Temecula, right? And I remember moving there in '93 and being like one of the few Black families living in Temecula. Like we all knew each other. It was like, okay, I see.
Right. Right.
And going to middle school and high school there and hearing other kids talk about college and being in ROTC and my parents taking me to polo matches and hanging out in Del Mar. And I mean, you talk about access and you see a different life than what you may have grown up in. And my parents knew enough to put myself and my siblings in a different environment so we could have access or know how to get it. And my siblings and I are all college graduates, but at the very we're also hustlers too.
Mm-hmm.
This was not easy. Writing a business plan and putting my vision to paper was extremely difficult because you start to doubt yourself, and then you need to find the money. And so,
Right.
okay, now I need to use my money that I'm working for to put to my dream. And now I also had to make sure I got good credit too, right?
Right.
So now I need good credit because they're not going to you don't just get to walk into a bank with a business
Right.
plan and say, can you give me $150,000? Like that's just not how it works in this world.
Mm-mm.
And so it's one of those things where it's a constant you move a mile and then you lose a quarter of a mile, and then you keep going, and and it's you almost, I remember like at the final stretch, I was so tired. I was like, okay, look, I remember just going into the city building to start crying, like Jesus, just like just help me,
Right.
just please. And so permitting and fees, and
Yeah.
I was just like, what? And no one tells you this, and
Right.
it is not something you can read in a book. And understanding city government and understanding the state of California alcohol and beverage requirements, rules, fees, and everything. I mean,
Hmm.
this is definitely something that if you really want to do it, there is a lot of work that is put in to do it. And think about not having access on top of that. And think about not having the money on top of that. And think
Right.
about having a network of one or two mentors that could help make things a little easier. And that's why, you know, home ownership and entrepreneurship is so difficult in Black America, because we need help, we need access. And when you're dealing with this racism in the banking system and the housing system, when you're dealing with that on all facets, you have to have the resilience to figure it out.
Right. I think it's also important that we have conversations like this where we're honest and we're vulnerable and
Yes.
we share. I didn't know. I mean, wanting to just walk into the city building because you're sick and tired of all of the back and forth and cry is real.
Mhm.
I mean, there have been many times where I just sat on my floor, just like crying out, God, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to take this next step. Um, but then pulling yourself together and just saying, all right, I'm just going to trust and I'm just going to go ahead and take that step. You know, whether it's trusting in the higher power, whether it's trusting enough in yourself, trusting enough in your idea, you got to trust and believe in something. You've got to make that investment and just keep moving, either way it goes. So let's talk a little about it. It is Women's History Month. Now, women are an incredibly important consumer market to the alcohol industry. However, leadership in the alcohol industry is still male dominated. Over the last few years, an increase in women led spirit brands has kind of gotten some attention. We're seeing some women doing some great things out there, and they are really making strides and overcoming that gender gap. But what about women-owned wine shops and breweries? Is there much in the diversity in there? What about gender? What about race?
Yeah. So in terms of wine and beer retailers, I think we all know each other. We all follow each other on
Mhm.
Instagram. You have Happy Cork in Brooklyn. You have Three Parks Wine. You have House of Purevin. There's actually another Black-owned wine shop in San Diego in the East Village called Boutique Vino. Uh,
Okay.
it's a very small number, and I would say we could probably count on our hand.
Yeah, and you just rattled off probably most of them.
Yeah, you can get
Wow. Now, do you connect with one another? Do you support one another?
absolutely. I wasn't look. This is the thing. I had a conversation about this on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
You, there, I think culturally, we there's been instances, and I've been, subject to it as well, where you get to a place in your professional life or in your career, and you see that there might be another sister or brother doing some stuff, right? And in the past, it might be like, well, I don't want him stepping on my toes, so I'm gonna just let him do his thing, and I don't, or he or she or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there has to be elevation of each other in order for this to be successful. There should be no reason we should have 15 black owned. You should have 100 black owned wine and beer shops in California. You should have
Mm-hmm.
1,000. You should like there is room for all of us to do what we want to do. And
Right.
I've had people call me and ask for help or just to pick my brain. I had a sister call me from North Carolina, reach out to me and say, I'm thinking about opening a wine shop in North Carolina. And here's the things that you should look at. Like, go to the city, look at your demographics, and
Mm-hmm.
see if your idea supports the city's growth, and then go from there. And I remember crying in City Hall. I
Mhm.
remember not sleeping. I do not want people to have to go through all of that. There's no need for it. And I should not be an anomaly. I should be one of many. You know, there's only, and I'm being generous by saying this. There's like 150 Black owned, like, wine brands out there out of millions. Like
Right.
that should never be the case. And
Mhm.
so if I see a Black owned brand that A is great, is phenomenal, and B has a great story behind it, or C needs elevating, then that's what I am supposed to do. And that's what other entrepreneurs are supposed to do, because you never know. You might
Right.
need help, you know,
Somewhere,
you might need,
somewhere down the road.
you never
Now,
know.
and I bet you all of those Black-owned brands are not just producing sweet wine. I bet you there's a wide variety of wine types that they are having. So,
And there's also too, I was talking to a couple winemakers because I started,
mhm,
they're like, oh, I tried so and so's wine. I'm like, well, I'm going to connect you. And so even we, as entrepreneurs, we're so focused on what we're doing, like we have our heads down. And
yeah,
one that's like, well, I need to know everybody. So now I'm gonna connect everybody to make sure everybody knows each
right,
other, you know. And some of those, some of it's not intentional and some of it is, and it just shouldn't be. We all
yeah,
have our own path and purpose. And the more people that understand what you're trying to do, and the more people are willing to help.
right, absolutely. Um, so let's kind of shift gears just a little bit and let's talk about this pandemic situation or pandemic environment that we're in.
Oh, going
All
pandemic.
right. Yes, we don't talk about it. Okay. All right. So coronavirus has taken its toll on the entire world. Let's talk about the effects of COVID-19 on the food and alcohol industry. How were you able to survive and what are your plans going forward? Did you apply for PPP funding? Did you receive it? What did you learn from the process? Give us what you got.
The short version is so in January, like I'm coming off of the heels in January or February 2020 of having the McBride sisters here.
Mm. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we had Black Girl Magic experience.
Okay.
It's 200 people at SIP. Had the McBride sisters signing wine, taking pictures, kissing babies. I mean, everything, right? Everything. I mean, it was like, we're okay.
They were rock stars.
Right. And then I had my next event planned. Like I just had this plan. Like 2020 was supposed to be it.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks after the McBride sisters event, we're on quarantine.
Mm.
And the first day I laid in bed, I slept for like a week because I was tired.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the constant going of being an entrepreneur.
Right.
So it was like, oh, this will probably blow off in a couple weeks. So let me sleep. Then week 2, it's like, no, you guys are gonna be in the house for 30 days. And you're like,
30 days.
what? Okay. And then you start, oh, what about the business? And then once it's like they start, we have to shut things down.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that I wasn't freaked out, because I was freaked out,
Right.
freaked out. But what was it that I could do? My priority was making sure that I had a roof over my head and that I could eat and survive during this time. Because if the pandemic took my business out, that's just the way, like, that's just what it is. It's been a great ride.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a long time ago, one of my mentors saying, you're opening a business at a good time. And I said, why? And he said, because if it don't work out, file for bankruptcy and you can still recover, right? Like, oh, okay. Like it made me feel a little better. Okay. So it was like, well, maybe this is the time you
For bankruptcy and
time
keep it
bankruptcy
moving.
comes in, right? And I didn't look. I had some wine. People were emailing and texting, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, look. At this point, I needed to find a job and figure out how to
Mm-hmm.
take care of myself. Like I didn't even care about SIP. And so by week 3, it was one of those things where I don't know if you know, being a believer, like you just have to be still. You need to sit your tail down somewhere and just like rest and let things happen around you and see what you're supposed to do next. And that's pretty much what I did. I
Okay.
ended up landing like a temporary job through a friend, was working that. And just, it was just one day at a time. And it was one of those things where it's like, look, God, if I'm supposed to still be doing this, you will make it very clear that I'm supposed to be doing this. And if this is the end of the road for SIP as a brick and mortar store, then I'm well equipped to go back into the world that I can go get a job, and figure it out. And that's what I did. And
Hmm.
I just waited it out. And Tamron Hall show called and was like, "Hey, we heard about your business." And I was like, "Okay."
Oh, really? I didn't know you were on Tamron Hall. Okay.
I did a little like quick segment because they were like, support your business or whatever. It was, she was
Uh-huh.
all the businesses that were closed. And so Tamron Hall called, and the funding started coming out. And then I was spending a lot of time applying for grants and trying to find funding and do all that stuff. And slowly but surely it just started coming in. And then it was just like, okay, this is going to work out. And then you have to think about, okay, now I owe all this money in the rent. I'm like, look, I'm going to have a conversation with my landlord. Look here, brother.
Right.
These are our options. This is what we could do. And it ended up working out. And when things just started falling in line, and
Hmm.
I just reopened, Saturday after being closed pretty much a year, with the exception of 2 weeks, and people would come in and buy wine. But the greatest thing is I was still able to connect with the community and then build even more stronger relationships with brands and winemakers, and
Yeah,
introduce those brands to people who a captured audience at home.
absolutely. Now, how
So
did you do that? Did you stay in touch with them via email lists or
yeah,
social media?
everything.
Okay.
I have some great followers on social media. I really like staying connected with, my customers. I mean, and then you reach out to winemakers, and it's like, I have some time on my hands. Like, I've been meaning to try your wine. How can I get it? Can I buy a bottle and try it? And just I just really took the time to really think about what I was going to do. And
Hmm.
my life isn't this brick and mortar store. Like, I mentor other founders and entrepreneurs. I help students. I my goal is, I'm not tied to that. I can I could convert my business to an online business if I need to. I just, people have to learn how to pivot. And I think the other thing is just, it's the hustle. We're so used to working so many dang on jobs already. It was just like, okay, well, let me turn left over here for a little bit and then
Right.
figure it out. And I think that that's the resilience that we had during, this pandemic.
I end my show the same way. The name of the show is Let Me Say This. So let me ask you, Miss Cassandra Schaeg, like a bad haircut, say, I want you to frame it like this. Let me say this, and then give us your last words.
Hold on, let me drink some water for this.
Mhm.
Let me drink this first. Let me say this. Black people will no longer be overlooked. We have talents beyond our wildest dreams. And if we support each other and we elevate each other, we have all of the things that we need in order to change history. And that's it.
That's it. We have all that we need within ourselves. We just need to believe in ourselves and take the actions that we need to invest in ourselves so that we can be in the space that we want to be in. Want to connect with you, how do they do that?
Yes, they can find me on Instagram, Sip Wine Beer. I'm on Facebook. You can look up Sip Wine and Beer. I have a YouTube channel called Wineversations. You can
Okay.
check out some episodes and hear my wine shenanigans and very important people that I've had the pleasure and luxury of connecting with and sharing their stories.
Okay.
You know, you can Google me, Cassandra Schaeg, Shag like a bad haircut. And, you know, drop me a note, you know, if you ever want to connect. And
Okay.
I always try to figure out how to connect with people.
How
So
to make that happen. And for sure, if you are visiting Southern California, especially the San Diego area, they can make that trip up 15 and stop by Escondido, you
it's
know.
here.
Yep, you will be there. All right, thank you so much again. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, and looking forward to continued success. Next time I'm in San Diego, you best believe I'm coming through.
Yes.